peers, friends, yeah, young people. If we're talking about teen sex trafficking, we know the average age of induction is between 11 and 14 or 12 and 14. Then who are the people who are going to be most likely to see that thing, to catch that happening? It's the peers. And they're the ones who are also the most likely to be listened to. You have tremendous influence as an adult, as a parent, but you don't have nearly the amount of influence that peers have. Even the best relationships, parent and teen relationships, by virtue of the type of, by virtue of the developmental phase that a teen is in, and the way their brain works, and has to work. I mean, it's supposed to be this way. This is the reason why we don't spend our whole lives living in our parents' bubble, right? We're not supposed to. So you don't have as much influence as your peers have. It's a tough transition. I got 3 little kids. It makes me sad to think. I was talking kind of around this earlier. It makes me sad to think about not being the star of my kid's life. Now some of you have teens already. You know what I'm talking about. I'll be there. But so this is the opportunity that we have also as men to have an influence in inviting the lions among our youth to really get involved and work their magic. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about, what's really happened here. And what Just Ask is, I want to explain really briefly if I can. It's kind of a little bit hard to explain what it is, but I'll tell you that the energy behind Just Ask and the things that we've been able to accomplish have been largely accomplished through the efforts of some of our heroic teens. So that, to me, is the take-home lesson. The rest of what I say you can ignore. The energy that's going to make this happen is actually your youth, your teens. How you're going to harness that energy and what you're going to do about that is going to be the difference between whether you succeed or fail. So be thinking about that, please, as you take some of these materials, as you look at some of these materials, as you think about, okay, how am I going to take this message forward in my family, in my community, and that is where I want you to look. So there's a bunch of different ways that human trafficking happens. When I first learned about this, my background is in marriage and family therapy. I'm a professional therapist, and I didn't have an idea of what human trafficking was for a long time. It wasn't part of my schooling. I did learn about it over the course of time. I thought I knew what it was. It was when people from outside the country are shipped in, right? And then they're garroted. No, they don't see the light of day. We never see them because they're garroted away, and somehow some black market transaction happens, and they're sold for sex, probably in some massage parlor, right? And you never see them, and they wouldn't speak English anyway, right? That's the idea that I've got, and that's how I imagined it happening. So I was called in to work with a human trafficking victim who was picked up. He was working with this is a male victim. He was working with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security. They were trying to take care of him, but they were also trying to help him, get him to help them with their case against his traffickers. He just wanted to get out of there. They brought me in thinking that maybe he wanted some counseling. I am used to working with domestic and sexual violence survivors. That's my business. I've been doing it for about 10 years now, working in a domestic and sexual violence agency. And they brought me in because they didn't know who else to call. Back then, there wasn't a whole lot of, this was some time ago, and back then there was not a sense of who the organizations were that provided these services. I think they were probably around. I didn't know who they were. And also I'm very glad to say that there's more in the way of services that are out there right now, more than there's ever been, and I think that we're going to see this improving over the next couple of years. They brought me in, I sat down with him. I was kind of expecting for somebody to be feeling traumatized and identifying himself as a victim and looking for that kind of help and support, and he wasn't. He didn't see himself as a victim, and he didn't see me as being a helper, that's for sure. And he didn't see the police, the law enforcement people, he didn't see them as trying to rescue him. He saw them as trying to use him to win their case. And he felt held hostage by them just as much as he felt held hostage by his trafficker. In some ways, his life was way worse. They had him put up in a place to live that was not convenient, had bed bugs and all that kind of stuff. He's like, this is not the life I want. And and you wonder what keeps trafficked victims in the life. I mean, you can kind of start to figure it out, right? So what we're starting to learn as a community is that the more people become aware of this and start to see this problem for what it really is, the more people are going to, the more we as a community are going to be able to outsmart these traffickers. They're going to continue to change, so everything you learn today can get you thinking about it, but realize that there are other ways that trafficking can happen too. These are some of the more common ways. I'm going to describe the gang connection too, because I know that's something that, and we might not have time to go into it a lot, but there's also, as you learn that the gangs are now getting into selling teens for sex, whereas they used to sell guns and drugs because it's cheaper, they can make more money, they can do more with it, and it's harder to get caught, right? Especially when these teens who are being trafficked they don't see themselves as victims, they sure don't identify as victims, and if they get busted, which they do all the time, they don't tell the police, help, thank you for arresting me, I need your help, I need to get out of here, I'm being trafficked. They don't say that. They don't see themselves that way. They don't look at it that way. They've been completely, their brains have been shaped away from that. And the gangs wield enormous power. Gangs are controlling the recruiting process, but they're also controlling, they're controlling the market. They're selling sex in neighborhoods that they control, through venues they control, through systems that they control, and that's how they're able to operate with amazing efficiency. And you don't often always know the gangs. And so when you said, with the suggestion, watch out for if you see your daughters starting to hang out with gang members. Does that mean if you see some thuggish guys walk into the house wearing uniform colors of bandanas, that those are the guys you need to watch out for? Remember, in Brianna's case, it was this good-looking, clean-cut, blonde guy who just was charming, but he was part of an organized ring of human trafficking. So that's what these gangs are doing. So when I came in on this process, and when my eyes were opened about this, was really just back a few years ago. And I'm a latecomer to this. Like I mentioned, Shared Hope has been doing this a long time. I'm a latecomer to this work, and I was brought in when a few of us in Fairfax County, including Fairfax County Police, our office, the Office for Women and Domestic and Sexual Violence Services, the public schools, and some faith-based and community partners came together, and our goal was to try to get a little bit more clarity on what our system was for responding to somebody who was in crisis, imagining in our minds that somebody would come forward calling a hotline and say, help, I'm being trafficked, and we need to know what to do. We didn't even know how to respond to that problem. And then we start to learn, we're going to have to do way more than this, because people aren't picking up that hotline to call and say, I'm being trafficked. What we're going to need to do is we need to get the community aware. So we came up with a two-pronged approach, and we called it Just Ask. Just Ask was the name we picked for the organization because it implies what we want to invite the public to do, and that's to ask questions. And we came up with a two-pronged approach, which has to do with educating the public, getting more public awareness out there, including education in schools. Fairfax County, in that first year we created Just Ask, Fairfax County rolled out a human trafficking curriculum that's a module within the family life education curriculum, and they do this they started doing a age-appropriate, age-specific section of the course for each year starting with 6th grade. So 6th through 11th grade, kids are getting taught about this. And Prince William County, like you heard, is doing, it had also rolled out the same year they rolled out their education curriculum. And there was a lot of pushback because, people are uncomfortable with the schools being the ones to teach kids about sex. You can imagine they're uncomfortable with the schools teaching about commercial sex, right? And there was a lot of pushback from well-meaning individuals, including school board members and parents. And one of the kids, and one of the students actually, who was really a champion for this happening, he said, he was at a meeting and one school board member said, this is not appropriate. We're not going to get 6th graders, 12-year-olds. We're not going to get 6th graders to be 12 and 13-year-olds to be learning about sex trafficking. I mean, we don't want our kids hearing about that. Our little 12 and 13-year-old kids. This is not something that they don't have the emotional maturity to deal with this at that point. And this teen, he said, drawing on all the courage he had. I mean, this is some school board member, and he's just a teen in school. He said, with all due respect, the traffickers don't care if they have the emotional maturity to deal with it. In fact, they're banking on them not having the emotional maturity to understand. And so that's where we come in. So the other half of it was getting professionals like me, people who had already been trained in working, treating trauma and working with victims of violence, to understand, okay, how is this a little bit different? This is a little bit different animal. And so that was what we came up with. So really, really briefly, I'll just say what we've done. And if I could just click super, super, super fast through these slides. Yeah. Just a couple clips of things. We put together a fact sheet. It's not any better than anything that our other colleagues like Shared Hope have been able to put out, but it's targeted to a specific audience. And so I hope you'll just use it as another resource. I just keep sliding down. We plastered the area as much as we could with the money we had. With advertisements, we put some billboards on buses. We got some people to donate some space inside and outside of buses. Just keep on scrolling through there. We put up posters in Tyson's Corner Mall for a couple months, which was incredibly expensive. But more of this needs to happen, and we're hoping that as this project grows, we're going to be able to do more of this. But people walking by, seeing this, we hope that it was getting people paying attention to what this problem is. We drew, as you can tell, we focused our ads. You can't really see this so well, but I brought a couple of these posters too, which you can keep as many of them as you can use here. Not everyone who adds you as your friend is what it says there, and it has a Facebook page that you can't see, but the guy down there at the bottom, his name is your broken dream. What was it? Your stolen dreams. That was it. There you go. You have one mutual friend. This guy's name is Your Stolen Dreams. Not everyone who adds you is your friend. And this poster here about, do you really know what your teen is doing after school? You got this schoolgirl here who's got her to-do list. She's got AP English, chapters 1 through 5, algebra, 1 through 15, odd, and then turn 10 tricks at the motel, family dinner at 7. That seems absurd, right? She's going turning tricks. She's seeing maybe a dozen men in a single day, and then she's and then she's coming home for dinner at 8 o'clock. Or is that really happening? Yes, yes, it is. In fact, that was the MO of the reason. When I got brought in on this was shortly after there was a big successful bust of the underground gangster Crips who were trafficking. And they were recruiting. They had contacted hundreds and hundreds of girls for recruitment, and some boys. And they found that a lot of these teens were still going to school. They weren't coming home dressed like like a prostitute you'd see on some 70s cop movie, right? They were coming home dressed like school kids. In fact, they were going to school dressed like. In fact, they were being sold dressed like school kids. They were coming home for dinner. Some of them had 2-parent families. Were still attending school. Were still getting A's. I'm sure that wouldn't keep up for long, but they were able to stay under the radar. They weren't necessarily taking the school bus to school, skipping out, getting on the school bus and coming home. No, they were going to school. They were at their classes, and then in those few hours of time before mom and dad get home is when they were being trafficked. So realize that the traffickers are incredibly adaptive. And everything you think you might know, they're going to try to find creative ways to get around it. But the things you're going to notice are that they're going to use a lot of those same kind of tricks, and they're going to target teens in the same kind of ways. All teens are vulnerable, not just runaways. You're pretty, you could make some money. Obviously, he's a predator trying to, this one wasn't as great. But we did produce a poster in Spanish. So if you do have connections with Spanish communities or with any Spanish congregations, this is another possibility, and I brought along some of these. And we started a wristband campaign, and this is where the teens got real important. There's a young woman by the name of Kira Beckman who is now 18. At the time, she was a high school student at West Springfield, and she started a real great movement there of other teens learning about sex trafficking. And she was one of the people who really helped us get this wristband campaign off the ground. She put wristbands on the wrists of about 3,500 students. And then some other schools joined in too. This year we've got about a dozen schools in Fairfax County participating. We don't have any yet in Prince William County. I work for Fairfax County government, so that's why a lot of my stuff here is about Fairfax. Prince William is doing some parallel stuff, so I'd encourage you to work with them too. You can do a Just Ask campaign in your school as well. It's not a Fairfax only thing. And the idea with the wristbands, they have the Just Ask website, which I'll show you in just a second. And the Just Ask website, I'll actually open it up in real time. Yeah, if you could go ahead and open that up. Go to Just Ask. How about Parents Should Ask? Parents Should Just Ask. There's a lot of resources, videos, information on here. It's an interactive website, so you can, if you're a teen, you can find information for teens, questions you can ask, things you can look for if you have a peer that you're concerned about. If you want to ask for yourself, you can take a quiz to see it. Is this a red flag situation? How can I protect my teen? Go ahead and scroll down, please. A couple videos here. Scroll down to the next video. I'm conscious of time, and I'm sure I'm taking too much, but can I play just a 2-minute clip from this video here? This is part of the curriculum. This is the parents piece of the school curriculum, Fairfax County.
She met a boy, and her light turned on. He had no license, so I was driving him to the movies. I was driving him wherever they had to go, so I felt like I had some control, and at least I knew what was going on, so I thought in their relationship, I couldn't keep Hannah home. She still went to school every day. She still was going to her legitimate job that she has, and she still has. She was showing up at the places that she needed to be faithfully. She just wasn't coming home. We knew there was something going on that was bad, but we didn't know what. I didn't suspect that really her boyfriend was involved in it. I thought maybe the worst thing, drugs. And they sat down and they said, your daughter has been involved in this world. And I said, why do you have a folder with her boyfriend's name on it? And they said, he's her pimp.
Okay, we can stop it there. So, pause in there. If you scroll down, you'll see a couple questions, and when you click on them, they expand out. Just a summary of some things you've already learned about the scouting phase, the manipulation phase, the trapping phase. It doesn't always look so uniform, but these are a good idea of what you might see. How can I protect my teen? Keep scrolling down, and you'll see a couple questions you can ask, and it's going to give you some ideas. If you click on the plus arrow or plus button there, or anywhere on it'll expand out. You're gonna notice that a lot of the things you can do to protect your teen from sex trafficking are also the things you can do to protect them against a lot of other perils that are out there, right? A lot of similar warning signs too. Because if we are talking about drug use, gang involvement, teen dating violence, bullying, stalking, any of these kind of things, like you're going to see a lot of these same kind of factors. So these are some general things. What if I think my child is a victim? It gives you some idea about resources, questions to ask, things you can do, and I just want to tell you what impact this can have. Thank you. I invite you also to check out the website more at your leisure and see how you can use that resource. And please let me know if you have any questions or any recommendations or feedback or anything like that. We probably should. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I probably should just leave the floor open for questions to the extent of however much time we have. But I want to just say about what has been happening as a result of this recent effort. We started Just Ask almost 2 years ago, and a lot of that groundwork took the first half of the year. But when we started getting the faith-based communities, I'll tell you, were really some of the earliest and the most active forces we saw. We especially Christian churches. And we've also been joined more recently by synagogues and mosques, and we're still seeing a lot of energy there. And then the teens at the schools, also the absolute biggest force behind this. And we put together an event about a year ago at the Fairfax Community Church, and we had a couple dozen churches. People from a couple dozen churches came to the event. They brought their teens, they brought their friends, and we had a speaker come in who was a survivor and a dynamic speaker, amazing woman, Rebecca Bender. She told her story, and we and one of the young women, one of the teens who was there, had sometime previously been approached at a bus stop by a young adult male who started flirting with her, showed some interest in her, convinced her, got her to come back to his uncle's house, which was nearby, and he had sex with her there. He tried to talk her into working for him, and she managed to. Something about that situation didn't feel right, and she was wise enough to break off any contact with him. And so he did not succeed in inducing her into the life at that point. But as you can imagine, he's working on. She's not his only. It's not like he gave up. He's like, oh, that was too hard. I'm not going to try that again. No, he's trying over and over and over again. Justin Strawn, one of the guys the police picked up, had contacted 800 or more girls on Facebook to try to recruit them for trafficking, using again, not using the same trickery that we already learned about. And so he's trying this over and over again, but this girl has kind of moved on with her life, but she's having a hard time. And she was working with a counselor. Somebody obviously encouraged her to come to this event. She came and she heard the speaker,